everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. And I hope that Thursday finds you well, and I hope that the world is doing whatever it's doing nicely to you. We're being visited by a puppy. Do you want to come and see me? Come on. Come on. Yes, a puppy has arrived and demands her audience. What? What is it? Is he a big furry baby? Oh, the biggest and furriest of babies. Do you want to come back up here? Do you come back up here? No, I just want to sit here and look out the window. The big baby. We had some rather raucous battle earlier. She really enjoys play fighting, and I don't know if you can tell, but I got the worst end of it. You can't really see, but like right there, I've got some. She bit the crap out of me, basically. I mean, it's all out of play. She's not like going rabid or anything. She just doesn't really know how to play without going all out. So the red mist descends. Hey, you gotta stop licking your leg. Yeah. But anyway, so I've got war wounds on my arms where the puppy fangs have attacked me. She's so crazy because she gets the zoomies when she gets all riled up, and she'll be just jumping back and forth for no reason, and then just like run around the couch like crazy, and it's pretty funny. She's a nutty little dog, but you know, that's what we get, right? But I do hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's having a good day. This has been hey, you gotta stop licking your leg. This has been an exceedingly long week. We are approaching the end of the semester, and that means all sorts of, last couple of weeks projects. I have to collect an exceedingly large amount of data about student performance and student learning outcomes and stuff like that. So I've got a whole bunch of that stuff going on. I'm still going through training courses myself. Students are becoming more aware that the term is approaching the end, so they're more involved in trying to raise their grade suddenly. Back when I was teaching grade school, I made up a riddle. And it goes, what digs a hole for 15 weeks and tries to fill it in 1 week? And of course, the answer is a procrastinating student. So, Well, see, that's the thing, Junk Collector. I have already built in extra credit to the class. All they have to do is do it. The thing is, they don't want to do it because it's one of those things where you actually have to earn the extra credit, and it's a significant amount of work. And a lot of people are like, "You're going to make me do that to get extra credit?" And I was like, "Yeah, and if you want the extra credit, you're going to do that. You can't give me anything else?" Nope, that's the options. And work is pretty hard. And the extra credit is not insignificant. You can get up to 4 points added to your final grade, which is almost half of a grade level, which I think is ridiculously high amounts of extra credit. But you have to do a lot of work. You have to watch documentaries, plural. You have to answer detailed questions about them and write a paper about them that's of moderate length, but you know, if you want it, you got to do it. That reminds me of when we had notebook checks in 5th grade. 3 tiers of grades per page: complete, incomplete, missing. But any missing page, I put a blank sheet of paper with a title on it to boost it up from missing to incomplete. There we go, Moose. That's actually, that's very clever. That's very clever. Welcome in, Moose. Also, hey, a junk collector. I don't think I said hey to anybody. DCI Banks, how's it going? Cave, welcome in. My wife is here. Green Herring, good to see you, my friend. Junk collector is here. Paradox Moose, welcome in. Vipers is here. You have to mow my lawn. You have to paint my house. No, I don't want any of them knowing where I live. And the big Tuna Neil is here. What's up, Tuna? How's it going, my friend? Welcome, welcome. Yeah, I don't want anybody knowing where I live. So, that's okay. I'm sure it's not hard to find me if they really were interested in it. But advertising that is not the same. All right. Hey, stop. You gotta stop licking your leg. She's licked another hot spot on her leg. Because she just doesn't know when to quit. Fix my roof. Oh no, the roof is already fixed. We spent significant amounts of money fixing that. You've got that Tommy Lee Jones look about you today. Yeah, I'm pretty exhausted. I'm pretty tired. It's been a long week. I did about 12 hours of work today in about 6 hours of work. And it was if you're wondering how I did that without time travel, the answer is I basically didn't stop at all, and I cut some corners on some things, and I worked way faster than I needed to be optimal. My wife is here. It's a very neutral statement, which would lead to a Futurama reference that you would not get. But other people who did watch it, you now see it too. Okay. I once called to a former teacher's house to speak to his daughter. Oh. I never went out with anybody at my school. Well, let me rephrase that. When I got to high school, I never went out with anybody. In elementary school, you go out with people, but it doesn't really count, right? But in junior high or high school, none of the girls that I ever went out with were at my high school because I didn't really like any of those people. There were like one or two people that I maybe would have considered, but no. You didn't go out with anybody at your all-boys school. There you go. Slept through an entire Zoom meeting today under the radar. Ooh, wow. Was that one of those things where you don't have to have your camera on and you just sort of checked in and zoned out and napped? That's I've worked through Zoom meetings where people are like, we need to have a meeting about this, and I'm like, I don't have time to have a Zoom meeting. And I've sat in the background and worked on other projects that needed to get done. I've done that before. Yeah. You never use your camera. Hey, that's fair. That's fair, right? Yeah. You establish a precedent early on, and then you don't have to live up to unexpected or unnecessary expectations, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying. What are they going to do? You don't even dress. There we go, right? You just show up in your shorts. Nobody knows what's going on under the table here. It's like the old Saturday Night Live skit with Rachel Dratch and Will Ferrell talking about the hot tub. That below the surface there's a frenzy activity of hands that you can't see in this hot tub. I like that one a lot. That's one of my favorite skits. I did drama too. Anyway, so we're making our way through the 9th century, and it would be sort of remiss of myself, given who I am as a person, to not take a little bit of time to talk about the Vikings. And there's a reason for that. First off, the history of half side of my family is from the Viking world, and I, after doing a substantial amount of genealogical work, traced my family all the way back to not the Minnesota Vikings, but actual Vikings. One of the guys that we'll probably mention more the next time we come around and talk about France is a guy named Rollo. He's one of my ancestors, and I'm related to William of Normandy, and I'm related to a lot of the sort of larger Viking people, which might be why I don't tan that, and the other half of my family is Irish. So I've got anger issues and expansionist mindset kind of running through the brain, right? This is why post-apocalyptic warlord Shane is such a threat. Imagine what a sober Viking could do. Right? Or a sober Irishman. My family name traces right back to the Norman Conquest. That's cool. DCI Banks, we might be cousins. We could very well be cousins and never know it. If you want to, you can send me some messages, and we'll see if we could trace each other back to ourselves. That'd be kind of neat to have a like a 50th cousin or something in the UK, and then I'd have an excuse to go visit, right? Like, I've got to go meet the family. That would be awesome, actually. That'd be really cool. All right, so first off, let's talk a little bit about why Vikings isn't necessarily an ethnic term or a racial term. It's more of a... I said that wrong. It's not a racial term. It's more of an ethnic term. It's just as likely that one of my ancestors killed... Yeah, that's true too. That's true too. Quite true. When we talk about the concept or the word Viking, and I just... Okay, I've already got that up there. I don't even know why I'm trying to type here. The word itself is an old Frisian word. The Frisians were a group of people that were roughly Germanic in nature. The original word, if we go all the way back to Anglo-Saxon or Old Frisian, is either Vitsing or Viking. Old English is W-I with an accent, C-I-N-G. The Old Frisian is W-I-T-S-I-N-G. Are you not entertained? Is that not why you are here? Amateur archaeologist. Now that sounds like an interesting streamer. And Melissa in denial at the same time. Holy moly, we're just getting rated like mad. Welcome in, everybody. Amateur archaeologist and company. Dun 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 dun. Just another guy named Harry. What's up? Amateur archaeologist, welcome in. have a shout out. How were you, and how was your stream? And Melissa in denial, literally seconds later, hello, and how was your stream, and how are you? Um, Let me introduce myself. First off, for everybody coming in, Jupiter Moxie, hey Miss Melissa, Els, Crafty Snail Tail, Amateur Archaeologist yourself, Potatoes or Death, Irish Heritage right here too, right? Just another guy. Welcome everybody, welcome. Um, so, hello everybody. My name is Shane. I am a college history and sociology teacher, and we have a humble little stream here called Adventures in History. This is episode 136, and tonight we are talking about the Vikings. But in the stream here, normally what we do is we talk about history, and we chase rabbits, and we will end off talking about TV shows or movies or music or something like that eventually, and we'll throw in whatever just happens to come up organically. This is not a lecture stream. I like to call this a guided discussion stream, if that makes any kind of sense whatsoever. I don't like the idea that history has to be boring and stuffy. I also don't like the idea that academia should sit up in an ivory tower and cast knowledge down on everybody as if people are just peons or something. I like the idea of information being free, knowledge being accessible, and everybody having a fair shot of learning if they want to. That's sort of my thing. Jupiter Moxie is getting a bachelor's in sociology. Represent, I've got an MA in sociology, and I teach it mostly now. Most of what I teach now is sociology. I get a history class every now and then now, but taught history for a long time, and I stream history. That's sort of my first love, if you will. Melissa and I just launched a program that is focused on educating and making history/archaeology more accessible and understandable. Well, that sounds like a cool concept, and it sounds like something that I would definitely support and get behind. So let me go over to an Amateur Archaeologist Twitch page and drop a follow on Amateur Archaeologist. Dun 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 dun. Spooky Doots, thank you so much for the follow and welcome on in. Hope you're having a good one. You plan on a master's as well. Excellent. It's a very rewarding field. I quite like it. Dun 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 dun. I dig both archaeology and unoriginal puns. You know, everybody does, right? Dun 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 dun. Jupiter Moxie, thank you so much for that follow, and welcome in. Welcome to the adventure. So normally what we do is we have a topic on Thursday nights. What we're doing right now. We're actually going through history chronologically. We started all the way back about 3 years ago now. We actually just passed over our third year streaming. So we are now into, we are coming up on year 4 of streaming. We're almost done with year 3. And we've been talking about the origins of history, and we've gone all the way through. We started back with what makes humans humans. We talked about opposable thumbs and expanding brain cases and all of that stuff. And we've made our way all the way up to the 9th century of the Common Era. And we do things sort of regionally because it's just too hard to cover 1 year everywhere on Earth. So we sort of geographically move around the world for a century. I've got my lovely Google. Wrong way. That way. That's where Google Earth is. And we'll just sort of move around. So we started over here and we did Japan and Korea, and then we did Northern Asia and China. We did Southeast Asia. We did Central Asia and India, and then we did the falling apart of the Umayyad Caliphate and the rise of the Abbasids and the Abbasid Golden Age, and then we did the Byzantines, we did the Bulgars, and we did Eastern Europe, and then we did Northern Africa and the Umayyads over here, the Emirate of Cordoba, Then we did some England stuff, and now we're talking about Vikings. If you come back next Thursday, we're going to be over here talking about America stuff during the 9th. So this is the scheme. Every other Tuesday, we talk viewer request. So this most recent Tuesday, which would have been 2 days ago, we did a viewer request stream. And what we do there is people in the chat will pick a topic, and then I'll go put a discussion together, and we'll have a good talk about it. And on Tuesday, we talked about the history of alchemy and all of the weird little things that sort of play into where alchemy came from. It was a pretty good stream. Had a pretty good time. So that's what we do. And welcome in. Please feel free to participate at whatever level you're comfortable. If you want to do the lurk, we love all of our lurkers here. But if you want to ask a question, even if it's sort of random or doesn't necessarily directly involve, do your thing, right? Because why not? It's too much fun to sit on. Well, how do I say this the right way? It's way more fun if we just talk, and it's not as much fun if I just sort of natter on, right? That's not really the goal of the stream. It's way more fun when we've got a lot of interaction. And I've got a puppy who's coming down the hall, and she'll eventually make an appearance on chat, likely. Alchemy. I love magic. Indeed. Actually, based on that Netflix Cleopatra thing, I was wondering if the politics of history could make a good viewer request. Probably. I mean, I could. There's definitely enough stuff there to talk about. The question is, could I craft that into some sort of narrative that would make sense instead of just here's all of the people that try to politicize history? Because that's been going on forever. Since we've had recorded history, we've had people blowing up their own images in the written word. Right. One of the first written accounts that we have of any ruler is this thing called it's by Sargon of Akkad, and he's basically yelling about how cool he was. Probably wasn't accurate at all, though. History: a bunch of folk throwing paper airplanes out of an ivory tower, right? The first ones you receive as a child are all the facts to memorize, and the later ones you get as an adult or everything you care about. It's pretty much everything is wrong. Isn't Egypt suing Netflix because of the docudrama? Yes, I don't think that's going to hold up in court. Egypt is suing the Netflix docudrama because they say that it damages Egyptian images, or it spreads slanderous information about Egypt. They're very upset that an actress that got cast to play Cleopatra is of mixed race, and one of her parents is black. Because especially Zahi Hawass, who is probably the biggest name in Egyptology, got very, very angry with this and made public statements about this and got people within the Egyptian government riled up about this. So we don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't really see Egypt holding up much of a fight against Netflix. My reruns are not available on YouTube, but I do save all of my VODs here on Twitch, Harry. So if you want to go to my Twitch page and then click on videos, I have them separated out. So there are 2 volumes of Adventures in History, and I've arranged them chronologically or numerically, whichever one you want. There's also one for viewer request streams, and then there's another one for special streams that I do. Every time we hit 100 follower goals, I do a History of Middle Earth stream because I'm a gigantic Tolkien nerd, and we do a stream that is basically a historical lesson about the history of Middle Earth. So, cool stuff. And I agree, we do need more humanity-centric stuff. Is there a lot of controversy over what race Cleopatra was, or is that just type you see online? So, if we look in the ancient world, nobody really understood race the way that we do today. Our modern concepts of race are social constructions that really came out of the Enlightenment period, which is like the 1700s, basically. Uh, so in the ancient world, when you see someone described as an Egyptian or a Libyan or a Saite or something like that, or a Greek, they're not necessarily describing their skin color, they're describing their culture, right? These people are Greek if they speak Greek, if they dress Greek, if they follow the Greek gods. That's how you get sort of defined. So their definitions back in the ancient world were way more ethnic related, whereas today we tend to view things more racially motivated because of what we might call societal developments during the Enlightenment period. So when we read the ancient sources and we talk about people like Cleopatra, they just said she's a Ptolemaic Greek ruler. But, that doesn't really describe her skin color, and we don't necessarily know who her mother was. We don't have concrete proof of exactly who that was. Now, one thing that we can argue about is, if is what she would look like. There aren't a lot of pictures or depictions of her, and the statues that would have been of her potentially aren't still painted. So, I mean, there's some chance that you might be able to do some of the newer, like ultraviolet or infrared scanning of stuff to try to determine what kind of pigment might have been on the statue. But it's really, really hard to do that. The reason why it has been so kind of modernly politicized is that we care so much about race. If you look at, the way that people in the medieval period, like if you're looking at the Islamic sort of golden age of the Abbasids in the late 700s, 800s, and into the early 900s, if they talked about Egypt, they didn't really call them racial terms. If you look at the way that other people did, it was just like, this was a really cool time, and these people from Greece had taken over Egypt, and that's the way that it was. Modern Egyptians have problems being... Okay, how do I even say this without getting super duper political about it? If you look at a modern person that lives in Egypt today, they do not look the same as West African people, nor do they look the same as Central African people, nor do they look the same as Southern African people, or people from the Horn of Africa. If you look at most of the people in Egypt today, a lot of people would not classify them as black. A lot of people would classify them as broadly Middle Eastern. Some might even go so far as to say Arab, but they wouldn't care for that. The Egyptians would not care for that at all. And the modern Egyptian ideology and identity wants to be considered African when it suits them, and it doesn't want to be considered African when it suits them. And I know that seems really, really hard to explain, but that's the best way I can explain it without getting super far into the weeds. Yeah, so, I mean, there was a period of time during around like the end of one of the intermediate periods where the 26th dynasty took over, and you actually had people from Nubia that were ruling. Like Tantamonti was a pharaoh of Egypt, and he would today, if you looked at him today in America, you would go, that guy's black. But that was one dynasty, the 26th dynasty. I think it had 3 or 4 pharaohs in it. Get on with it. Thank you. Okay. Don't you forget your Sam. Yeah, exactly. I'd rather watch Augustus chase him out of town. Well, there we go. Wasn't she her own grandmother or great aunt or something like that? She married her brother, who had been married. I can't remember exactly how it was. The Ptolemaic family line is more like a family shrub. The only way to know is to travel back in time and see it yourself. There we go. Vikings, indeed. That's the topic for the night. What's up, Raveland? Good to see you. All right, so who were our people that we're going to call Vikings, and why is this word not necessarily so accurate in the first place? Again, the old word itself comes from a person of the bay or a person of the inlet. It's a word that basically describes someone that lives on the water. And that gets broadly applied to all of these different people, and they sort of all get lumped into this concept of Viking. But these people had different tribes, and they had slightly different ways of handling things, and they also had different areas that they called home. Now, broadly speaking, dun 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 dun. Spicy hot cider. That's a good one. Welcome in, and thanks for the follow. Hope you're having a good one. Spicy hot cider. That does actually sound good right now. Anyway, if we look at a map, goodness knows I love me some maps, right? So if we look at the darkest color red here, we're looking at where what we might call the OG Vikings lived in the 8th century. So that would have been the 700s. And basically what we're looking at is Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and a little bit of stuff over here that might kind of be considered Finland. The Finns were a different people ethnically speaking, and whether or not the Finns count as Vikings is a bit of a point of debate. Some people say yes, other people say no. So there we go. I don't know half as much about Africa as I should. Aren't a lot of people from Northern Africa, Morocco, Libya, etc. pretty Arabian in background? Well, the people of Northern Africa, what we might call Trans-Saharan Africa, people from, basically the Mediterranean coast here, their ethnic group is much more tied to the Mediterranean, and the reason that they might frequently be considered Arabic-esque or Arabic-ish when they're not necessarily at all, is the fact that the Arabic expansion of Islam took over all of Northern Africa, but people like Libyans and Tunisians and Moroccans and people like Berbers and groups like those, the Algerians, they would not necessarily easily fit under the title Arabic, and some of those groups would not really care to be called Arabic at all, but they are ethnically a bit more separate than the groups in sub-Saharan Africa. The Saharan Desert right here does separate a lot of people ethnically speaking, and the people here around the Mediterranean are going to be more ethnically linked with people that are over in this region, sometimes, especially in the modern era, than people in sub-Saharan Africa would be. Is there a reason why Skåne, which is a country, is more prominent than Denmark on the map? Probably it's a shorter word, so they could fit it with bigger font. I don't think it has any sort of specific impetus behind the size of the words. But anyway, we're looking up here, and we're going to be talking about all of this other stuff, especially this lighter red stuff, which is going to be going on during our period of time. We're going to be looking at a lot of this lighter red and then a little bit of this orange, perhaps, before we get done with the day. Now, who are our Viking people, culturally speaking? Well, they're going to be arranged again in these they're clan structures. they're not really going to live in really big cities. There are going to be a few cities that are considered hubs of trade, but they're much more going to be organized in small villages that are going to be just a few families, or a few smaller towns, which might have, 5 or 6 different clans. We're not talking about big metropolitan zones here in the Scandinavian world. But what this is going to mean is that there is typically going to be a lot of moving back and forth, because your populations are going to be interested in trading with each other. They're going to be interested in seeing what's going on, and a lot of these individual small groups aren't going to have 100% of what they need to kind of make it all the time. So you're going to have a lot of exchange between these clan structures. You're going to have a lot of people that know everybody that lives in the other little village, just on the other side of the mountain, or maybe around the bay, on the other side of the bay. You're going to have a lot of interaction. There are going to be times, especially during big festivals and things like that, where basically anybody that can from the surrounding area will congregate at one location. Now, this might be one of the bigger cities, or this could be some sort of sacred place in the woods, or near a waterfall or something like that. It sort of signifies a special place for gathering. So they're going to be loosely connected. I think that's a good, comfortable way of explaining it. What's up, Dame Karen? How's it going? Recently read Serhii Ploy, History of Ukraine, following on current events. Bit amazing how... Yeah, we'll talk about the Kievan Rus tonight. Unreal Brian. I did a 4-hour stream on the history of Ukraine back when all of this stuff started, like about a year ago right now. About a year ago. Some people just kept asking me questions about, like, why is this happening and why is this going on. So I did about a 4-hour stream and edited it down to like 3.5 hours, and you can watch the VOD of that if you want to. Did you ever watch the Viking show on History Channel? I did watch. I think I watched most of it. It started off okay, and then it got silly. I really didn't like the actor that they got to play Ivar, nor did I really care for the way that they portrayed Ivar. Ivar in the sagas was not crippled like that. He was called the Boneless because he could basically wiggle out of anything. He was he was hard to catch or to grab. And when Ivar sort of became like the de facto king of everything, it just got kind of silly, and I bailed on it. It takes about 300 years of history and mushes it down into 2 people's lifetimes, which is very inaccurate. There are things that it covers that did happen. The Great Heathen Army happened. The Siege of Paris happened. The Sons of Ragnar going over and trying to kill everybody. That kind of stuff happened. But, well, I guess it's written in the sagas that it happened. We'll have to take some of that stuff with a grain of salt. I thought the production quality was okay. I thought most of the actors were okay. I really didn't like the person that they got to play Ivar, and I don't like the accent that he did. When he spoke, it started bothering me just to hear him speak. I much preferred the guy that they got to play Bjorn. I liked some of the stuff that was going on over in the England story, but I think they beat that a little bit too much into the ground. So I stopped watching the show. I never got all the way through it. So Rollo's story was not more it's hard to say what was more true when everything was such was such a crazy thing. I mean, Rollo was a real person, and he did end up marrying a French queen, and he did end up getting baptized, and a lot of that stuff did happen. But it was just kind of messy. just kind of messy. Yeah, boneless was more metaphorical. It didn't have anything to do with the fact that he couldn't walk. Since the Vikings were from different countries or areas, do we know how they communicated? Yeah, that's actually a great question, Jupiter. They all spoke roughly the same language. They had regional dialects, but the language that they spoke was Germanic in nature. They were linguistically tied back to movements of people from Central Asia that came over about 1,000 years prior to this and had ties to other Germanic languages, Gothic languages, and stuff like that. So they had regional dialects and words that would have been individual for the areas, but they could get along well enough and they could understand each other. And also, if they couldn't necessarily understand their own dialect, there were plenty of these people that were at least bilingual. That's something that's much more common in the ancient world than it is today. A lot of people in the ancient world could speak multiple languages, especially one of these big, maybe Viking kings or Viking chiefs that had to put together an army of disparate groups of people from sort of all over the region. They would probably know multiple dialects of the same language as a way to try to reach out to the people and speak to them literally in their same language. That's a great question, though. The OG Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror's granddad. Yep. Bjorn was great, Nordic actor too. I did not know that he was actually Nordic, but he was one of the better actors in the show. My understanding is that Old East Norse hadn't diverged fully into the modern language. Oh yeah, it hadn't. The Old Icelandic or the Old Norse is actually sort of crystallizing at this time. I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus. Moxie, thank you so much. I also love linguistics quite a bit. It's one of my niche areas that I dive into as frequently as possible. Yeah, Ragnar. Well, there might have actually been somebody named Ragnar Lodbrok, but whether or not he did everything that the sagas say is questionable. And the sons of Ragnar are probably not actually all his sons. They sort of maybe refer to themselves as that, figuratively speaking, to create a bond between the different kings that would have made up the Great Heathen Army. I don't have a problem with Ragnar being a real person. I would have less of a likelihood to believe that all of the people like Bjorn Ironside, who was really a person, and Ivar the Boneless were actual brothers. Those people were probably using Sons of Ragnar as a way of rallying a varied group of Viking warriors into one larger army. You don't know about ancient times, but all modern Scandinavian languages are easily understood. Well, see, that's the thing, and let's also not call a whole group of people weirdos. One of my dear friends abroad is a Finnish guy, and he's a really cool dude. And I don't. Let's just not call whole groups of people weirdos. I speak both English and bad English, right? You speak English and angry New Yorker, right? And it's all like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? And you just like gesticulate broadly and yell syllabic, gibberish at each other. Indeed. American English, right? Was it true that Old Norse sagas were never written but were in song? They were typically recited, yes. If you look at the oldest of them, stuff like the Edda and the Volkingson saga, those were going to be recited orally and either chanted rhythmically or sung, yes. Now, when we start getting a lot of these things written down, which actually is a couple of centuries after this kind of stuff, they're of course going to translate a lot of this into prose instead of the poetic version. But you can still get a translation of the Edda, which is one of the biggest ones that's poetic in the original poetic cantor. Or cantor is not the right word there. Camber. Camber's the word, sorry. All of the sagas are pretty highly embellished. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? That's the thing, right? We we know that they're going to be at least partially made up. But this is a personal thing here. I have a personal belief, and you can take this or leave this if you want to, that a lot of the stuff that we might sort of classify as legendary or mythological contains within it at least some potential grains of truth, right? For example, nobody thought that the Trojan War was real. Everybody was just like, this whole thing is made up. Homer wrote all of these things down and compiled the Iliad from different stories of Greek history. There really wasn't a Troy. Really wasn't a Mycenae or anything like that. And then we went and dug all of them up. And then we're like, oh, maybe there's a little bit more to this if we really look at it that way. And that's just one example of a lot of different things that we could look at. For a long, long time, people thought that the Xia dynasty of China was a complete fabrication, but there has been excavation work, especially around the Longshan culture, for the past 20 years or so, that's starting to look a lot like the myth of the Xia, the great sage kings and stuff like that, might have actually been based in reality. There might have actually been political groups that were trying to expand their power over multiple polities. So that kind of stuff is always, to me, again, this is my opinion, you can take it or leave it, going to be... It's okay to go, yeah, that's just myth, or that's super highly embellished. But what I don't want to do is chuck all of it out under the guise of, it's all just made up. Right, that's kind of what I want to get at. What college do I teach at? I teach in the southeast of the United States. If anybody wants to get really deep into the sagas, Old Norse, Jackson Crawford has excellent stuff on YouTube. I've heard that, but I've not seen any of it. If you want a translation of the Edda, Snorri Sturluson, Snorri Sturleson. Snorri Sturluson. That's the translation of the Edda that I suggest. Yeah. Did they find evidence of the Trojan horse? Not directly, Dame Karen. Atlantis is real too. ABC. I will believe. I will agree with you with an asterisk. How about that? When you lived in Oregon, people just discovered that, hey, we're on the fault line that could go any day. They realized that Native American stories talked about occurrences of earthquakes. Yeah, exactly. Right. These stories didn't come from nowhere. They might have started with a small local thing and then become sort of generalized, but I don't think we make up as much as we think we make up, if that has any logic to it. Moving forward. There's a puppy that is right here. So when she shows up on stream, I will usually give her some pets. And sometimes she'll get up and like come up on stream. Kaylee, do you want to come up here? You want to come up here? You want to come and see me? Oh, we're going to get a puppy audience. Come on. Oh, yes. There's the puppy. Hello. You want me sugars? Oh, thank you for the sugars. What are you doing? Oh, Kaylee Poo. You big baby. You just a big baby. Do you need to go outside? You have to go see Brittany. Brittany will take you out. Go see Brittany. She'll wait till I get on stream, and then she'll come back here and do the I want to go outside thing. But I'm not going to stop streaming to take her outside. She knows better. So she's just a crazy dog. Porque no los dos. Exactly. What about Viking stuff. Well, okay, we all know about their gods. I do have some pretty interesting stuff here. Wrong one. Here we go. Um, Here's a stone with Loki on it, because Loki, of course, one of their cool gods. Also, TV show was recently out. What's cool about this is that Loki has his mouth sewn shut, which is reference to a particular myth where they sew his mouth shut so he can't lie, which I thought was always kind of funny. One of my favorite stories. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, and I pick the pictures that I want to show. Also here, this is pretty neat. This is a little figurine of Odin, who has his ravens, Hungen and Mugen. These are thought and memory, the ones that go out and basically collect all of the knowledge of the world. And Odin is sitting here on his magic throne, which is pronounced Hildskjalf. I probably butchered that. Hildskjalf. It's Hldskjalf. Hildskjalf. Anyway, basically, while he's sitting on the magic chair, he can see everything that's going on in the universe. So, you know, we've got cool gods. Everybody is, I think, probably at least a little bit familiar with those. We won't necessarily spend too terribly much time going through all of that stuff, but it is suffice to say that they are highly polytheistic. They did human sacrifice, and one of the biggest things that they're going to be in conflict with over the next 200 years is Christianity. We've talked about their linguistics. I'm trying to make up a bit of time. I usually only try to stream about 2 hours. I know that's about as long as people can handle stuff. Also, I've still got to go teach 3 hours of classes tomorrow, so I try to save a little bit of the voice, if that makes any sense. This really cool thing here is actually something that we could talk about a little bit. This is the Oseberg ship, and this is a Viking longship. And these particular Viking longships were a bit of a design marvel. They were capable of carrying really, really heavy loads, but they have a very low draft. So a draft is the part of the boat that's under the surface of the water. And with a lower draft, you basically have the ability to sail into very shallow water. And these Viking longboats are going to be what ends up giving the Vikings a lot of the edge, especially the show up, raid, do our thing, and scarper off before you can return to us. You can see here that this does have a mast, so it could be propelled by a sail, but we've also got our holes here for our oars. So if we don't have the wind, we can do the rowing. So these are multi-purpose craft that are very, very seaworthy and quite capable of being rowed through very, very shallow waters like rivers, but also out onto the open sea and even through the ocean. So these are very, very capable and crafty ships. And they are going to be one of the secrets to Viking success. The boats are awesome. I don't know why we don't build them like that anymore. There's actually I can't remember if they finished it or if they had been paused for some reason because of COVID. But one of the things that some researchers, this particular ship, by the way, is in Norway. If you go to the museum in Oslo, you can view this particular ship. Some of the researchers here were trying to rebuild a version of this ship, basically piece by piece, trying to see if they could recreate the make of the ship. Vikings were absolutely the first Europeans in America at L'Anse-à-Deux up in the northern part of Canada. Welcome in, Lumpy. Yeah, a Norse with no name, right? For those of you that might be new to the channel, I always try to name the streams with a pun. So, a Norse with no name, of course, referring to the great America song, A Horse with No Name. So, I try not to point it out until somebody points it out in the stream. I'd usually try to let that arise organically. But Lumpy, it's good to see you. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're doing better. And we'll put it at that. But thinking about you, my friend. It is beautiful. It really is. Did you see the shipbuilders back then design these boats to fall apart after a few years so they would have... I don't think they did planned obsolescence in their ship design. No. The way all the pieces fit together is like a 3D puzzle, right? It really is. They're brilliantly designed ships. The shipwrights back then knew what they were doing. All right, so why do they start expanding, and why suddenly Vikings, right? What was the function of this? What was the reasoning behind this? And the answer is actually really, really hard to sort of point a finger at. Same with Roman roads. Absolutely. I've walked down many a mile of a Roman road and have great pictures of lots of them. And they're amazingly designed. You've never been to the North Sea. Today's ships get battered by it. I have never been to the North Sea, but I'd love to. Planned obsolescence feels like an Apple invention. It started in the late 80s with home appliances, especially things like blenders and toasters. And now it's pretty much everything. Viking coin in Virginia. I had not heard that one, and my gut is skeptical about that one. I'm not doubting that they found it there, but I would be interested to see an archaeological report of that particular find. It started with light bulbs. Okay, well, clearly I'm wrong then. So there you go. Okay, clearly I was wrong. It was light bulbs. There we go. See, I'm a human. I do things wrong sometimes. Anyway, why were they expanding? Now, there are a lot of different thoughts about this. And some of them make more sense than others. One of the ones that has a lot of people interested and has a lot of support is the concept of trade. Specifically, metal trade, because there aren't a lot of precious metal deposits easily accessible in the Scandinavian region. And while Rome and especially, the height of the Roman Empire was going on, there was a lot of precious metal movement within Europe, and a lot of that sort of filtered its way up into Scandinavia. And then Rome fell apart, and there weren't really a lot of strong, powerful countries with big trade routes that moved around anymore. So a lot of that stuff sort of fell out. And a lot of the theory is the people left the region trying to tie back into existing trade routes. And when they started exploring, they just found it was easier to steal it. And then they were like, okay, cool, we'll just go steal it from places. So that's one of the thoughts, that they left their native homeland in an attempt to search for trade routes that would hook them back into especially what we would call luxury item trade, not just like food, but the fancy stuff that's hard to come by. And then they found that it was easier to steal it from the Europeans, or the more like northern Atlantic coastal Europeans, and then just sort of run away. And now we've come full circle. You thought Sweden has a lot of metal. It's black metal, so it's sort of black metal. Right? They do have a lot of metal for stuff like iron and things like that, but especially silver. Silver was one of the metals that they really, really seemed to like, and there's not a lot of it easily accessible. Now, we also have to remember that they're doing mining with ancient techniques, not necessarily with modern techniques. So modern mining, if there are ore deposits or specific types of metal deposits there, we can get to a lot more stuff now than they could, because we have mechanization and things like that. Bartasi, welcome in, and good to see you, my friend. Yes, indeed, we are indeed talking about the Vikings. They did like the silks and the spices and that kind of stuff. And one of the things, especially, that's going to draw them into this eastern part of Asia down towards the Black Sea is to hook into the Silk Road, which of course ran, kind of right up through here. A lot of the stuff that we might talk about later on if we have time, like the Kievan Rus, is an attempt at getting down to these products that had basically hit these big Muslim territories and then stopped. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, the caliphates that sat right here were basically the biggest consumers of luxury items instead of the Western Europeans, right? So while Rome was still the center of the world, things got pulled over this way more. But especially when Western Rome falls and the Eastern Romans think everybody over here is a barbarian, you don't see a lot of those luxury goods continuing down the Silk Road over into Western Europe. If it gets into Europe, it's going to be into the Balkans and then kind of dead end there, maybe over into Italy, but not really up into the northern parts of Europe. So one of the things, especially up the Dnieper River and some of the stuff that's over here in what is modern day Ukraine, and of course their dealings with the Byzantines later on, a couple of centuries after what we're talking about right now, that would have been in an attempt at getting to some of those Asian goods that are coming out of the Silk Road. Good question. You're a Viking. Awesome. I'm an American, but my heritage is from Scandinavia. My maternal side came from Scandinavia, and were part of the first Normans that took over France, and then were part of the Normans that took over England, and then they came over to America. So half Viking, half drunk. We're sort of broadly talking about the 9th century, so this is the year 800 to 900. Cool. First king of Norway. Absolutely. That's great. The Norse here were actually some of the first ones that went out, and that brings us to another potential theory, specifically dealing with Norway and Denmark. Now, for a long time, and when I say a long time, I mean probably about maybe 70, 80 years worth of history, a lot of people thought that what pushed the Vikings out was a big climactic event that made everything way colder. It sort of made everything way colder, and it pushed the arable farmland down to a smaller amount. They couldn't support themselves, so they went and left. We know now, based on a lot of really interesting archaeological and geological findings, that that's not actually the case. The time period that coincides with this particular expansion of the Viking people was actually much warmer than just before it, and significantly warmer than what comes just after it, which is what we call the Little Ice Age, which starts around 1300. So this particular period was warmer, but especially in places like Norway and Denmark, it was much more wet. There was a lot more rainfall. And this is potentially going to be what gets some of these people moving. When you don't have farmland because everything is a marshy swamp, it's hard to produce enough food. And if we look at some of the first people that did go out and do raids, it's people like the Danes and the Norse. So are these people the ones that got it started, and then people over here, in Sweden kind of saw what was going on and they're like, hey, don't forget us, we want to go too? Maybe. But again, it's hard to nail this down completely. One of the theories is a demographic argument that says, well, there were just too many men. I don't know if I like this one very much, but I'll explain it and you might like it. I do this a lot. I try to give all of the theories, and then you can sort of pick whichever one I guess suits you the most. I don't like giving my opinion super much. I'll put the opinion hat on if I'm just going to go on a rant. But I'll tell you where I stand on stuff. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure that everybody has the full spectrum of potentials. The demographic argument is based around polygamy. So the the polygamy argument is, and Lumpy's like, oh no, just go for it. Okay, well, I mean, I'll tell you what I think about the polygamy argument. Sure. So let me explain it, and then I'll tell you my opinion of it. So this is the opinion hat. We have headwear on the channel. When the opinion hat gets summoned, I get to speak my opinion freely. I don't like the polygamist idea because I don't think it causes as much of an issue as a lot of these people would think. So let me explain the polygamist argument. It goes sort of like this. Vikings were polygamist. And because the big kings were capable of getting big harems of wives, the younger men, and especially the less able men, were forced then to go look for wives in other places. Now, that makes a certain amount of sense, but is this enough to dislodge tens of thousands of people? Yeah, probably not. I don't think this is it purely. If it's part of it, it's part of it, but I don't think this is the main thing. A lot of this is driven by modern, what we might call gendered archaeology, where a lot of people are trying to take our modern concepts of gender and apply them to ancient concepts to try to see if there's any validity of examination through that lens. But I don't know if we can do that all the time. It's definitely worth thinking about and talking about gender in history, absolutely, because we all know that what we think about it now is not the same that people have thought about it forever, for sure. But is this some sort of women shortage where we've got to go conquer other areas and steal their women and bring them back so that everybody can have women? I don't think so. I think that would be much more the case if the Vikings were a city-dwelling people where they lived in big population centers, but I don't think that's what's actually going on in most of the situations. I think we're living in small clans where people are making sure that people get married because that's going to keep the peace more. We're going to make sure that our sons get married off in good marriages because that makes good neighbors. I don't know if this is, I don't think that this is a valid argument for the entire reason that the Vikings began expanding. I just don't think that's a logical argument. If it's part of it, it's part of it. I don't think it's all of it, though. So, there we go. There we go. There's my opinion. The first founders of Norway and Denmark were brothers around the year 400. So that marks a period of time, historically speaking, when Germanic peoples were moving into Northern and Eastern Europe. And a lot of the foundation stories that come from around that time use brothers as a metaphor. For example, the foundation of Russia, which we'll talk about, I guess, a little bit later on, involves this guy named Rustic and his brothers. And if we look at these people, yeah, they might have existed, but were they actually brothers? Again, we're using this as a metaphor because we want to say that our people groups are related to each other, and the people from, Norway and Denmark are brothers. We're kin, but are we actually kin in the historical sense? And were these people that we say were the founders of these groups of people literally responsible for everything that they do? And I think we got to be a little bit careful about that, especially in the 400s during this period of time, because they have no written sources that survive from that period of time. The legends even of that area aren't written down until about 600 years later, and a lot can change legendarily when you put that much time between when something happens and when somebody writes it down. How many Vikings were alive at that time? That's a fair question, and I don't know the answer to it. I could spitball a guess and say probably, between 10 and 20 million, but that's a small guess. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. We could probably work backwards from stuff like army sizes if we knew how many people were actually in the Great Heathen Army, I can look at the statistics that suggest how many people were in it, but I think, yeah, strength unknown. So when you're calculating population, you've got to work kind of backwards. Assumes that each Viking longship could carry 32 men, leading his conclusion that the army would have consisted of no more than 1,000. Well, that's kind of lowballing it, isn't it? 1,000 Vikings, that's probably not going to be enough to do what they actually did. Let me give you a way of doing this demographically speaking or population wise, the logic. Okay, so if we've got 1,000 soldiers, that means that our population has 1,000 disposable men between the ages roughly of 16 and 40. You don't really want to stretch it too much past 40 because of life expectancy back then. So 1,000 men between 16 and 40 means that they're going to probably have at least another 1,000 population of women that are in that same range. And then they're going to have older people and younger people. So you're probably going to add about 1,000 of the older people and probably about 2,000 of the younger people. So if you can produce 1,000 soldiers, you're probably going to have a population of about 8,000 total, or maybe 7,500 total, to support that many soldiers. Because you've also got to have people that are capable of keeping enough food supply for those people, and arming those people, and building enough ships to carry those people. And you don't necessarily want to send your best shipwrights out in the battlefield, so you've got to keep some of the men at home. If you've got 1,000-man army and your population is 7,500 or 8,000 people, that's probably about right. You got to keep the bloodlines pure, yeah, pretty much. Theory: the Vikings went to England to look for hot women. Maybe so. Maybe they started expanding because it was cold. At Blank Page, we actually talked about that. It was actually warmer at that time than it had been previously. Now, warmer in Scandinavia is not warm everywhere, right? Brothers in arms, right? That concept of we're compatriots or confederates. Foundation, no, Isaac Asimov. Yeah, pretty much. No, we've got rules and everything. They were the sons of... Yeah, but again, like, were they really real people? Maybe. Did they really do what they were legendarily supposed to do? Maybe. Well, 10 to 20 million in the entire region, it's not as far-fetched as you might think. So in all the regions of Denmark, like all of the regions around Norway and stuff like that, and this northern stuff that they start taking over, 20 million probably isn't logical. 10 million maybe. There's only 4 million right now in Norway. I don't know, maybe. There we go. There are more redheads in the Isles. Well, I mean, Celtic people are all over the place at this point. There are Celtic people in Spain over here at that point. So, I mean, there's still Celtic people in Spain. In Brittany. Norwegian genealogy... I get what you're saying, Bartasi. I get what you're saying. Why did the Icelands go to Iceland, Greenland? They were explorers. They liked it. They dug going out and doing great things and accomplishing things that they got to brag about. All right. Another couple of theories about why they expanded. One of them, not one that I support completely, is this idea of retaliation. So if you look at what's going on in England and France around this time, there were a lot of wars where pagan people were being beaten up on by Christians. And some people go, oh, well, the people from Scandinavia retaliated for the wars against the Frisians and the Saxons, who were sort of cousins of theirs. Um, so, you know, that's why they resorted in raiding. But I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily all of it. There could have been some of that, but I don't think it's all of it. So how do we even start this whole thing? Where do we even start? Well, we start at this place. This place is called Lindisfarne. And in 793, this is sort of like the epicenter of Viking expansion. There's a monastery here that gets raided, and there's a whole bunch of gold and stuff that gets brought back to Scandinavia. And then they go, holy moly, that's great, because we can find these churches and monastery places everywhere in Europe. And there we go, right? Cool sagas, absolutely. They studied Hegel. I would love to go to Iceland. Could internal conflict have accounted for all the migrations from Scandinavia? Brittany, that's potential. The internal conflicts were usually very short-lived, though. The allegiances and alliances were never really going to last more than maybe a generation or two, because people weren't tied together in what we would consider a state. They had a lot more freedom to kind of do with whatever they wanted to do, and beefs between groups of people rarely ever carried on past father to son. Like if you killed my dad, I might come after you and try to go kill your kid, but there's no guarantee that this beef is going to last longer than, us. Maybe my grandkid and your grandkid are going to go off and raid France together, right? If there was internal conflict that caused some of this, one of the theories that I didn't mention, because it's a sort of a smaller one, deals with the way that Vikings and Scandinavians did inheritance. Typically speaking, only the oldest kid got the biggest chunk of stuff, and sometimes got all of it. So there could have been conflict among brothers where, I was supposed to get some stuff and I didn't get anything, so that kind of sucks, and I'm going to try to take it from you. But even those conflicts, again, are usually not going to last more than one, maybe two generations before everybody just kind of gets over it. So, yes. My name is Indigo Otoya. You come, my father, prepare to die. What's up, Waltiverse? Hope you're doing well, my friend. They got salty about it. Well, yeah, that's what happens at Lindisfarne. Now, the raiding stuff that goes on is going to mostly be coastal stuff, and this is not designed at conquering territory. This is show up, float really close to some people, jump out of the boats, grab as much as we can, jump back in the boats, and be gone before any sort of ruler can respond. And they do this all over the place. They do this all over Northern Europe. They do this all over the eastern coast of Great Britain. And they do this all over Ireland, especially down on the eastern coast and the south corner down here. They get all the way down as far as Iberia. And I've got a map. If I should have just shown the map here. Look at all the places that they raided. All right, so up into the Finland region, they are going to raid down into Novgorod, which was home of the Rus, the Dnieper River, the Dniester River, the Rhine, and the Seine, all over. You can see that we're sort of moving out. Dublin's going to get hit not too long. Well, Dublin actually gets founded right around this. Well, no, sorry. This region gets raided right after Lindisfarne. Dublin doesn't actually get settled as a Viking settlement until about 841, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Normandy is going to get invaded, of course, in 911. That's Rollo when the French kings has to give up this territory. But we're seeing records of Viking raids down here, even in the Mediterranean, 860, 839. They're all over the place. Do 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 do. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But it felt good to get out of Ireland. What's up, Maddie? How's it going? Yeah. So we we see a lot of these people moving around. Lots of these people moving around. Um, they're going to get all the way to Paris. There's a really big siege of Paris in 845. Very big battle there. This was in the Vikings TV show, if you watch the TV show. Speaking of Iceland, they show up there in the 860s, but the first settlement in there in Iceland is about 870. They're going to just go all over the place because it's out there and it's cool, and why not explore it? If you watch the show Vikings, you'll know that Floki from the show was the guy that sailed to Iceland with a group of people. The sagas say that this guy named Floki was the first one that went there on purpose. A lot of the other people got blown off course and ended up in that area. That's sort of a common Viking theme. Like, we're sailing around, we got blown off course, and we find this land, and then somebody else is like, I'm going to go back there. And that was Floki. You got to tour the History Museum in Dublin. Oh, that's cool. They've got a lot of cool Viking stuff there. Like this thing. Viking hair comb. Pretty cool stuff. There's a whole bunch of Viking burial sites in Dublin. There's a lot of cool Viking stuff all over the place. All over the place. So, they even reached Vinland. Yeah, the Vinland saga. Well, the Vinland was later on. It's in like around the 1000 era. So it's about 100 years after what we're talking about here. But there we go. Iceland was completely unsettled pre-Viking, right? Correct. We don't know if people had ever been there before, but it was not populated by that time. Boop-a-doo-doo. We mentioned the Great Heathen Army a couple of weeks ago. Or was that last week? I guess that was last week. We talked about the Great Heathen Army taking over big chunks of Great Britain and setting up a region called Danelaw. That was established in 865. The Vikings are all over, and they're going to continue to be all over, and we're going to continue talking about them for at least another 2 centuries or so. So pretty cool stuff if we really think about it. Now, I mentioned the Kievan Rus a few times. Over here on the rivers in Eastern Europe, and we mentioned this back 3 or 4 streams ago when we were talking about Eastern European peoples, but it's worth mentioning here again because we're talking about the Vikings in specific. That Viking people did start moving down into this region and met up with existing Slavic people in the area and then started intermarrying. And by the time we get to about 882, we have the foundation of a region that's called the Kievan Rus. That is going to be a pretty powerful chunk of territory. So if we go back to our original map here, you can see the Rus states that were this mix of Viking and Slavic heritage. But the Vikings are pretty cool, and I am happy to talk about the heritage of the family. So I'm really excited to talk about this stuff down here in Sicily. The Viking states down here in Italy and Sicily and Africa are some of my favorite ones. Well, I guess technically at this point they're Norman states, but Norman is just short for Northman, so it's like duh, right? Yes, there were people called that, and there's a reason that is a continual thing. So, yeah, Normandy, right? The area or the land of the Northmen. Viking is people of the bay or people of the inlet. If we go all the way back to Old Norse, the word there means that. It's Vitsing or Viking, spelled with a W but then you pronounce it like a V. Dublin has a Viking museum called Dublinia, as well as the longboat statue next to the river Liffey. Yeah. Let's see. What have I missed in chat? 87. Yep. It's crazy rare for some kind of land to not be inhabited on some level. Yeah. It really is. Yeah, absolutely. The Vikings were all over the place. The Vikings made it all over the Mediterranean and carved all over stuff and graffitied all over stuff. It's pretty cool. But that is all that I had prepared. But as we all know, just because I've shut my mouth talking about this stuff doesn't mean that I won't continue to answer questions, or if anybody has any point redemptions or stuff that you want to do, now would be a good time. They didn't really disappear. They just intermarried with other people and became called, they started being called something else, right? Like Irish. A lot of people in Ireland are, if you go back in time, like half Celtic and half Viking. So I've probably got Viking on my father's side as well, because my father's family from Ireland was from the southern part of Ireland where a lot of the Vikings were. So I've probably got Viking on both sides of my family just via Irish, right? What happened to the Vikings in Africa? They got pushed out by the Muslims. They only really had territory there because they were brought into the Mediterranean on purpose by Christian people to fight against the Muslim expansion. And when a lot of the Christian people neglected to pay the mercenary Vikings, they just sort of didn't go away and then took over the territory and then decided that they could go fight the Muslim armies for their own good and take over land for their own good. So they were never very numerous there. They effectively had a toehold in that sort of Tunisia region, right around the ancient city of Carthage. And it was not very long-lived, but it was really neat when it was there. Yep, I get around. It's a cover of the Viking rowing song. There we go, right? Did the Vikings improve anything like the Romans? They made better ships than the Romans did. Maybe not ones that were as big or as capable of carrying as much stuff, but definitely ones that were better seaworthy ships than the Romans did. Roman ships were notoriously horrible in open water. The Viking longboats were way better in open water than the Viking ships were. I'm sorry, than the Roman ships were. The Normans went on to create these really cool castles called Motte and Bailey castles, which are sort of going to become the standard for small to medium-sized castles in all of Europe for about the next 220 years. So that's pretty neat. Don't want to be rude or anything, but I can give you the site. Oh, I mean, Bartassi, I don't doubt that you have traced your genealogy. What I doubt is that genealogy in the 400s is accurate, because nobody in the 400s kept accurate genealogical records unless you were the emperors, and we even doubt the emperors. If you're going back to the 800s, I don't have a problem with that. I can keep my people back to the 800s, but if you're saying that you've traced your lineage back to the 189, I would be really skeptical that that's accurate that far back, because it's just probably not going to be. We don't know enough about those people, and we don't have any way to prove any of that stuff. And I'm not trying to be rude to you either. I'm just trying to be... I'm far too realistic about historical accuracy for my own good in many cases. And someone's like, I'm 98% Irish, 2% Northern. Yeah, that 2% is Norse. Yeah, pretty much. Uh, Pretty much. If it's like broadly Northern European, you're Viking, bud. You're Viking. Mead, exactly. I don't actually know what mead tastes like. I've never had any. Um, I don't actually know if the Vikings ever. I'm sorry, if the Romans ever made mead. I know they did beer and I know they did wine. I don't know if they ever made mead. That's a great question that I don't know the answer to. Huh. I'm going to have to look that up. Were Vikings in Svalbard? I will admit that I don't know exactly where Svalbard is. I can Google it real quick and see. Where is Svalbard? Svalbard, also known as Spitsbergen or Spitsbergen, is a Norwegian archipelago. If it was part of Norway, oh, whoa, wow, that's way far up. If I had to guess, I would say no, but I'm not 100% sure. That far north of the Arctic Circle, I don't know if that would have been open to them all the time, and I don't know if they would have traveled that far north just searching. But I don't know. I can't say for certain. According to the Wikipedia, it says that the Dutch were the first ones that found Svalbard. But the Dutch also were quite capable of looking at other people's documents, especially historical documents, and mining them for potential value. So it could be that there might have been some reference to these islands back in some saga, and then the Dutch were like, "Hey, I wonder if those things were actually real," and they went and found them, and then claimed that they had discovered them. That wouldn't surprise me if that happened, but I don't actually know. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Vikings gave us skis, and they improved the British language. Yeah, a lot of our words in English came from Viking, especially a lot of our words about family members, like husband, husband. That's, there we go, and daughter and son, stuff like that. Did any Vikings carry their boats through a forest and mountains to surprise attack people going down waterfalls and rivers? Viking longboats could be carried, but it was not something that they liked to do. They were light enough to be carried by enough people, but they didn't really like carrying them. They preferred to drag them if they were going to move them across land. And moving them across land usually was not going to be their first line of strategy. That was something like, we don't really have many other options, so let's drag the ships across. That I don't know if there's any story that I know of where they sort of went commando, SEAL Team 6 sort of strategy stuff and carried the boats to do some sort of daring nighttime raid or something. I guess it could have happened. It's not outside the realm of possibility. I just don't know of a specific one. Mead is very sweet. I hear the Renfest near me sell mead. You just never have gone. There we go. Heavy wheat. Yeah. You're allergic to honey. Oh, wow. Yeah, so probably not. Svalbard is where they keep all the seed vault. Oh, so that's the... I can't remember what group does that, but I know exactly what you're talking about, like the really big underground seed vault. I've seen the pictures of the external part. It's just sort of like this random angular block with a door on it sticking out of the side of a mountain. I've seen that. They have a university there now. Interesting. The need for mead. Well, Waltiverse, it's funny that you mentioned that. One of the potential titles for tonight was The Need for Swede. But I asked my wife, and she said that a Norse with no name sounded better, so we went with that one. My wife has good taste, so. Svalbard, at least one member of your party is legally obligated to carry a gun. Wow, that's great. Not that people are legally obligated to carry a gun, but that it's needed because of polar bears. That's kind of crazy. English adopted Nordic pronoun grammar. So that old English stuff especially the old Anglo-Saxon stuff, was Germanic in nature already, and the admixture of the Nordic languages was just going to emphasize certain elements over the adoption of things from the other side of Great Britain, like the Celtic languages, which had sort of back channeled some words into English. So Anglo-Saxon and Old English was forming right around the same time as Old Icelandic or Old Norse. And when you put them together, because they had a somewhat rudimentary common language back in like old Proto-Germanic stuff, they were going to sort of reinforce each other and keep other stuff out. This is also why English had a lot less influence from Greek than other Romance languages. And English has relatively given up a lot of its Latin sort of pronunciation. Like we introduced a lot. It's a whole thing, but I mean, what you said is correct. But I'm just getting into the weeds, and I should probably get out of the weeds. Like a Werner Herzog movie. It's quite rare for a language to adopt a grammatical structure on that level. Don't go chasing waterfalls. There we go. Just to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. Eric the Red Light Special. That's great. I do have a smart wife. Icelandic is the closest to Old Norse. Yeah. So, and I know this actually because of sort of a nerdy way of getting about it. When Ronald Tolkien was teaching at Oxford, he was the only person at Oxford that was teaching Old Norse. And some of his lectures and writings got more popular in Iceland than they were at Oxford. Yeah, so like we lost the Latin declension stuff that they did, and we adopted more of the Germanic version of nouns and pronouns and adjectives interacting in the way that they do this way. That's what I was trying to say, just not very articulate. Greece was very far away. That's fair. All right, Lumpy. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Hope you're having a good one. And see you next time around. English didn't go in with Latin grammar, more logical. English is not one language. English is 4 languages in a trench coat trying to convince somebody it's old enough to buy alcohol. And I'll stand behind that. There was a weekly group where they would translate the dead Anglo-y languages. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Current Swedish grammar is, except for the genders, very simple. I don't know very much Swedish. The only words that I know are from listening to my wife study it. My wife actually spent a couple of summers there and knows a little bit. Interesting linguistic point. For example, the English doesn't use Latin grammatical structures. Auslan, our sign language, uses Latin grammatical structures. Ah! Well, that's cool. That's cool. I didn't know that. All right. Let's see who's around. All right, Walterverse, good to see you. Yeah, we're about to hit a raid, and we're about to... already know where we're going to go. Already know where we're going to go. So we're going to go do a raid. It's going to be lovely. You took a class. You lived in a Swedish museum, but you forgot most of everything. Yeah. Yep, Cryo. We're about to go raid Cryo. She hasn't streamed in like hecka long. Because of life problems and crazy people issues and stuff like that. So we're going to go raid one of my goodest and bestest streaming friends, Cryomera. Thanks everybody for coming in. Amateur Archaeologist, if you're still around. Bartasi. Skull. That's the only Swedish word that I can remember off the top of my head. And I know no Icelandic words. So I know that that doesn't actually work in your language, or maybe it does. I don't know how much they overlap, but that's like the one word that I know. Skull. So, okay. Cool enough. Cool enough. Also Icelandic. Oh, hey, look at there. I know a word in Icelandic. Anyway, we're going to go raid Cryo, who's doing some art. Cryomera is basically the reason I stayed streaming. Her positive reinforcement is one of the biggest positive reinforcements that I got as an early streamer. Cryo is great, so show her some love when we get there. Our battle cry when we raid is adventure, and you may use as many of the lovely emotes that we have as possible. Unreal Brian, it's good to see you. Glad you had a good time, and hope to see you back again. We'll be back next Thursday talking about America's stuff. But until then, everybody, take it easy.